why would anybody take the risk of not being stuck? It's so affirming of actually that as a survival strategy, isn't it? That it makes so much sense for a client, for anyone in life, to stay stuck when there's so much risk involved with change, with confronting pain, with working through difficult stuff. And it made me think about how in society generally, how few people I've come across that would hold that perspective, and certainly towards me in my experience of it would be instead, it's like, what's wrong with you? Why don't you want to change? And there'd be a lot of judgment on that. And I think if that's what we've generally come from and what we generally live with in society, I just thought just how powerful that is to sit with people who, with a therapist who's holding such compassion and such understanding and such unconditional positive regard towards the reasons why you're stuck. And I think how just revolutionary that can be for somebody who's just always been criticised for not making more progress, for not doing better, for not changing. And they've probably got around them very frustrated family members or loved ones or work colleagues or friends are like, what's wrong with you? Why can't you pull yourself together? Why can't you deal with your drink problem? Why can't you deal with your anger? Why can you not stop dissociating? Why do you always feel so bad about yourself? Why are you always apologising? And that's the general kind of gist that we get from people, isn't it? It's like, why can't you just? And I think what we're talking about here is an explanatory framework for why I can't just. And so I think that word just there is the kind of key, because otherwise we end up in the end of the spectrum that is like, well, of course I can't, because of all of these very valid and good reasons. Change is not easy. But why can't I just is like, well, of course I can't just do it. It's going to take time. It's going to take trust. It's going to take support. It's going to take the space and the curiosity to figure out why I'm stuck and why staying stuck is safer than becoming unstuck. So, for me, it's holding it in balance, as I always try to do with things, of not saying there's every reason why they should stay stuck, so let's support them in staying stuck, because that's really very sensible. Not letting them stay there, because actually that's not in their best interest long term either. And I think the whole reason, or the whole context of someone being in therapy, as I said, is to come in and to want to change. And I think it's very hard to hold that compassion towards yourself of being able to say, why can't I just get over my issue? But to be able to hold that more kindly and saying, I understand why I can't just get over it. And certainly for me, there was a long time in therapy that was devoted in many ways in retrospect, perhaps not intentionally at the time, but in retrospect, I can see we spent a lot of time focusing on me understanding why I am the way that I am, and changing my relationship with myself in that. So rather than having this inner critic that would sit on my shoulder, the shame gremlins that say, why can't you just change? Why can't you just stop dissociating? Why can't you just stop the flashbacks? Why can't you just get a grip? Why can't you just calm down? Instead of having that voice, developing a far more compassionate voice towards myself that was like, it's hard, I get it. And we spent a lot of time figuring out why I was stuck, not in terms of racking up a list of all the things therefore that I needed to change, but trying to delve below the thing beneath the thing that was keeping me there, and saying, well, what is it that this stuckness is trying to achieve? And ultimately we can summarize that, generally speaking, in terms of I'm trying to feel safe. It's a survival strategy. And so we'd take it from there into saying, well, we can all get on board with trying to feel safe. That's a great thing that your back brain is doing. So we're not in opposition. We're not in conflict with your back brain here. We're not, we haven't got me as the client sat in the client chair, the therapist sat in the therapist chair with the therapist whacking her finger at me and doing kind of like, you're here to change. Let's get on with it. Why can't you just do this? But it was more of that collaboration of coming alongside and saying, oh, I get why you're stuck, and I get why you want to avoid, and I get why you don't want to go there. And that's because you're trying to feel safe, and you're trying to manage the overwhelm of emotion. You're trying to make sure that when you leave this room and you have 167 hours before you can come back again, that you can manage in between times. And you're managing the fear of what if I suddenly reject or abandon you and we've opened Pandora's box and there's nowhere to take? So of course you're staying avoidant. Of course you're staying stuck. Well done. What a great approach and what a great strategy. So the strategy is to stay safe. So how can we achieve that overall goal via different means? Because the staying stuck as a strategy is achieving some level of safety, but it's not achieving other types of safety. It's not achieving the ability to go on and thrive in the world. So you come alongside what we're really trying to achieve, but then look for different ways of doing it. And when therapists worked with me in that kind of a manner, it melted away all of the antagonism and the resistance that I felt that I had to have towards them to keep them in their place, to know that they were not here to move me out of my stuckness. Because the therapist became the enemy. The therapist became the threat. It was the person that was saying, "Oh, I'm going to make things difficult for you. I'm going to make things risky for you. I'm going to make things scary for you because I'm going to be the one that is prodding the bear all the time, is bringing things up that you don't want to come up." So instead, the therapist came alongside me much more collaboratively in that sense to say, okay, let's try and get your back brain to get what it wants and what it needs, which is safety. But what we're going to do is we're going to do that in a more holistic way. And we're going to do it with your front brain engaged as well, to really try and think through what it is that you're really trying to achieve. Because there's all of these downsides to the way that your back brain is trying to achieve that. So we'd spend quite a lot of time as well looking at the downsides as well. So it's like, okay, so therapist would be there saying, I'm here to support you in your goals. So we need to know what your goals are and why you have them. And then let's look at what you need to have to achieve those goals and maybe what some of the unintended consequences of those goals would be. Because if your goal is to stay safe and you're planning on doing that relationally by isolating, then I can support you in that. But I also want to help you see that there are unintended consequences of that loneliness is a massive thing, that feeling unloved is a massive thing, not having practical logistical support in your life is a massive thing, and will get more important the older that you get. So the therapist wasn't there telling me, this is what you should do. We need to get you free of this stuckness. We need to get you free of this trauma so that you can live a life like mine. It wasn't some sort of colonialist attempt to bring me into her world and to raise me to her standards of living. It was really coming alongside, asking me what I wanted in the whole process, and then helping me see the consequences of the choices that I was making. So collaborating with me, allying with me on my underlying goal, which is like, I want to feel safe. I want to feel unbothered by this trauma. It's like, okay, so at the moment you're doing that through avoidance. So I can see why you're avoiding, because when you don't avoid, then the trauma is in your face and it's painful and it's difficult and you don't want it to be like that. I fully understand. I wouldn't want that either. The unintended consequence of that is that it will always stay there. It will always be prodding you from the sidelines. So is there a way that we can get what you want, which is the freedom from the symptoms, but without a payoff on the side, which is a lack of enjoying life now, a lack of engagement with life, a lack of relating, a numbness, a dissociation. And when I began to see it in those terms, I didn't have to fight the therapist for what I wanted, because he was coming alongside me in what I wanted, but was just helping me see, if I continue down this path, these are the consequences. If I choose this path, these are the consequences. And there's no right or wrong. There's just consequences in it. So that's how I found it so much more helpful to go about it, rather than, we need to get you unstuck. You need to move on. We need to progress this. You need to stop avoiding. You need to stop being resistant. It was much more understanding why I was being like that, figuring out what it was that I really wanted in it, and then trying to find other ways of achieving that.